Welcome back. It represents 43% of the world's population. The much-awaited BRICS summit, or the grouping of Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, ended in Goa this week. Leaders attending the summit adopted a 110-point declaration that covered a broad swath of issues, including building common grounds against terrorism and the need for striking a balance between economic development and environmental protection. Now, the summit itself was held under the theme of building responsive, inclusive and collective solutions. The declaration also touched on trade partnerships, helping small enterprises, promoting industrial cooperation and overall cooperation in areas ranging from nuclear energy to space. However, with the BRICS economies no longer showing the same consistent economic growth they once did, the question we are asking is, what kind of place does BRICS have in the world today as a body? How indeed can India benefit from other members and vice versa? To discuss this, I am joined by CRISIL Chief Economist D.K. Joshi and Deepak Prem Narayan, Chairman of First Rand Bank of India, a South African bank, and he's also President of the Indian Merchants Chamber. Thank you both for joining me. So, Mr. Prem Narayan, let me begin with you. So, I'm sure you've been watching the BRICS summit. You have a strong foot in two countries, at least in the context of BRICS, that is India and South Africa. What have you seen in terms of benefit, if one can say, in an institutional context, from perhaps a BRICS collective?
A couple of things. The NDB Bank has set a foot in South Africa, and the objective being is to cover the African continent for infrastructure, renewable energy. So that's been one of the major steps. The second thing that I've seen is that in South Africa played a neutral role till very recently on the NSG, and it played between, it parked itself in the middle between China and India, and because of the BRICS interaction and India's growth of business with South Africa, they have now backed India. So that's been a second development. Third is that South Africa, in the context of the countries with the 5 partners which are there, South Africa is important for us, and so is Brazil, because China and Russia have their own agenda. Although the declaration in Goa, as you correctly referred to, that they had some political announcements, it did mention very strongly that they'll follow the norms of UN in terms of terrorism. Security would not be the advantage of another country. But coming back to Africa, so these are, and the African Union, the declaration also says,
touch upon this,
yes, in depth for that matter, that they will work towards the developing markets in the African Union through public-private partnerships in infrastructure.
But do you see this giving a leg up to what you're doing, or would this have happened in any case?
No, this is definitely a leg up. The NDB, for that matter, setting a footprint there for Africa is a leg up. That is one. Partnering African Union. See, these partnerships like BRICS, it's moving at its own pace. There have been positive developments, but they take time to establish. And I'm a firm believer that in any foray, there are many a times, particularly institutions like this, that you may not have meeting minds, but when you keep sitting and talking and negotiating,
something does emerge over time.
Another institution that has evolved over here. So it's a question of institutionalizing BRICS. NDB was the first one. Now you got the rating part of it. That's also
that's I was about to ask D.K. Joshi as well. Okay. So D.K., let me come to you. So we're looking at an interesting situation. Of the 5 countries, that's BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. You have Brazil and Russia clearly in recession mode. You have let's say a country like India and China obviously going strong, and South Africa somewhere in between. So how does this add up as a bloc or as a collective entity?
Well, part of the reason why we are seeing divergence in growth is because of the commodity price cycle. Many of these countries, particularly Brazil, Russia, they are directly connected to the downturn in commodities. So I think as commodity prices move up, some of the divergence in growth rates will get corrected, and commodity prices looks like are likely to move up, because as the World Bank yesterday also projected that there is an upside to commodities in general and also to oil. But I think if you go back to the basics and look at why these countries were classified together. They were classified together because of their strength of domestic demand and their potential. I think that still remains, and I think once you have the right set of policies and more cooperation, I think going ahead, these countries can again look up, at least the ones that are fledging right now, can look up to better performance.
So, DK, let me ask you a more fundamental question. So, what is the, if you look at the global economy today and the fact that things are not going so well, what really is the theoretical opportunity or the construct for 5 such countries to work together?
Well, I think if you're right that I think the world economy is in a weak moment right now, and it has been so for almost 8 years now, and there's no decisive recovery, and there's too much of leaning on easy monetary policies, and I think unconventional policies, which itself creates risk to emerging markets, because I think once the policies reverse, the capital volatility will rise. So I think one set of issues relates to the risk that is emanating from very easy monetary policies and their unwinding at some point in time. But I think there is a lot to cooperate on, and I think the suggestions that I was at the World Bank IMF meetings in US last week, and the suggestion that seemed to be coming out was that the countries, even the advanced countries, should focus on education, on skilling, and fiscal stimulus, so to say. So I think given that backdrop, and if you look at the needs of this part of the world, I think particularly I think India, if I were to be very specific, I think we also need to scale up our infrastructure, and that is where this the BRICS opportunity shows up, because at least from the financing perspective, the creation of the new bank, I think can address some of the financing issues in a local context, so to say. But I think you need to go a little deeper than that, and I think the infrastructure creation is not just about financing. It's also about the risk that the projects face. And I think that is where we need to address it domestically. And then I think, and each of these countries will have to. China is an expert in infrastructure creation. I think it has successfully shown that over the years, and one can leverage on that expertise for other economies as well. So I would see that I think in the global context, I would say that the countries need to push their domestic demand up, need to create infrastructure. In that context, I think cooperation among the BRICS economies can be really fruitful, because the global headwinds will continue. Trade is already under threat, and the trade intensity of global growth is coming down. So I think countries will have to, and in an environment where advanced countries have also started looking inwards, and protectionism is rising, I think you need policies to prop up domestic growth, and cooperation in this set of countries can definitely help offset some of those risks.
So let me, we were trying to understand, when two countries collaborate, or like India and South Africa in this case, or it could be India and Brazil in this case, something special could emerge which is perhaps outside what, let's say, a political initiative could be, or a bloc initiative could be, as we are seeing today. If you were to build on that experience, what do you see happening in future?
Well, let's take this particular Goa meet itself. Brazil and India met on the sidelines. Now, Brazil, there were 4 MOUs that were signed, and it had to do with the agriculture side, it had to do with the development in terms of the animal husbandry, reproduction of cattle, etc. And Brazil is strong on that. It had to do with pharmaceuticals, regulation, it had to do with aerospace. Now, so that was a sideline. So this is one takeaway. And Brazil needs a partner also like India. And they see a great opportunity here for their agro-based processed products, amongst other things. So that was one. The second thing is the BIMSTEC, which has fallen in place. So that's another important takeaway, because you take the 7 countries which have been put together, other than BRICS, which is India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, and the Thailand, etc. Now, as a result of that, they are all growing at about 6.5% per annum. So there is actual growth happening here. There is a consumer offtake here. So this is, as Joshi was saying, that internal growth is one thing, but at the same time, when you're partnering with the right apples also, so BRICS and BIMSTEC, there is okay, we've got a situation in terms of Brazil's growth today, we've got a major situation in terms of South Africa. So this is another major initiative that came out of this. And what is very important is the recognition that within a short time, NDB, National Development Bank, has disbursed $911 million, and they've given $250 million to Canara Bank for an renewable energy fund. So there is action that has started. And you know, as they say, Rome wasn't built in a day, but I see BRICS within, plus the stance taken that the selection of the UN Secretary General has to be more in a more transparent manner. IMF and World Bank, where globally markets looked at them for funding. Now you've got another horse that is standing up, that is BRICS, I mean, which is the NDB. So, and NDB is going to be built up. You know, it's through raising. Once the rating gets better, there'll be.
So you're saying that as we create more institutions, that in turn strengthens the bloc itself.
Precisely.
Right. Okay. DK, let me come back to you. So if you were to compare, let's say, the BIMSTEC, which is the regional bloc, versus, let's say, a BRIC, which is not a regional bloc as such, where do you think we should be focusing our attention on?
Well, I think, I mean, to me, as far as the trade is concerned, I think multilateral solution is obviously the best one. And but since that is not happening, the WTO doesn't seem to be going anywhere. I think the regional agreements will help, and I think we should align, as was being pointed out, with the economies which in the region which have better growth prospects. And I think doing that, the inter-regional trade, so to say, I think, which is where there is enough potential. I mean, even with the neighbors, I think neighboring countries, I think our trade is dismally low. So I think there is a lot of opportunity in raising the trade, or lifting the trade potential, or realizing the trade potential in this region. And I think that, so one will have to strategically look at the economies. I mean, because looks like, I think, the bilateral and maybe some regional trade agreements will be more successful.
DK, let me interrupt you there. Thanks for that. Last word, Mr. Prem, and we've run out of time. So if you were to look ahead, so you said that there are very interesting things happening on the sidelines, or, you know, in a formal way, of course, the creation of the BIMSTEC, the creation of several institutions, which in turn strengthen the original institution or the original bloc. Are things looking good and positive from a BRICS perspective for you as a business person in the next 5 years?
Definitely. I would definitely say so, because of infrastructure, because of collaborative effort in the neighboring markets. I see that because India has skill sets to offer as far as Bangladesh goes, Sri Lanka goes, Nepal goes, and Thailand, Myanmar. And recently more forays have happened in these markets. I'm optimistic about this regional, multilateral, bilateral cooperation too.
Right. And you feel that business will benefit and business will grow as these institutions in turn strengthen partnerships between, or business partnerships between companies?
Institutions are critical, because you've got tax reforms required, you've got tariffs which are there, you've got customs issues. So these are being addressed, but they will have their speed. And India is keen to push this hard. And you saw that at Goa. So there were some declarations which were made specifically with this objective in mind, on regional economic cooperation.
Well, thank you, Mr. Premanan. We've run out of time. Thank you, DK. That's all we have time for in this episode of Policy Watch. We'll be back next week, same time. Thanks for watching.